Supreme Court ruling indicates that California's law that essentially provides some regulation in regard to secretive charitable donations will be reversed. Now, this paves the way for more dark money to flow into our elections. This is a disaster because it sets a precedent that can be applied more broadly to the electoral process. Now, the case had pitted the interests of charities to maintain the privacy of their donors against the state's interest in policing charitable fraud. The challenge against the state law was brought by, conservative nonprofits, American for Prosperity Foundation, a Koch-affiliated group, and the Thomas More Law Center, who want to keep their donors' identities secret and argued that the state had not shown a compelling reason for the law. So what this is about, I'm sure you guys have noticed, oftentimes there are these charitable donations to these groups like the Center for American Prosperity or whatever other right-wing group there is. I know that Turning Point USA is another example. And you want to know how they're funded, what nefarious situation is going on. It happens over and over again. We had just a little bit of protection against it in the state of California. And so the conservative justices swoop in this case and say, no, we're gonna reverse it. California mandated that nonprofit charities that solicit donations in the state identify substantial donors to the California Attorney General. The same information already goes to the IRS, found on the IRS Form 990. The Schedule B attachment required the organizations to report the names and addresses of their largest contributors. And so the lower courts had ruled differently from the Supreme Court, saying that a previous district court, for instance, held that there was ample evidence that donors would face public hostility and intimidation if their affiliation with the organization was publicly known and expressed concern about inadvertent disclosure. But nonetheless, they still voted to uphold California's regulation on this because they were concerned that there might be self-dealing going on with these charities.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, just let me clarify. That was a district court that ruled the same way the Supreme Court did. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals then disagreed with that district court statement.
That's right, you're right, yes, thank you for that.
But okay, now let's break this down. Citizens United said that, it's okay, they can give money, unlimited money, basically to politicians and to political efforts, because you'll get to find out who the donors are because that's them speaking. And so then you'll be able to judge for yourself. This says, no, we're basically overruling Citizens United and making it worse. Now you're not allowed to find out who the donors are.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the absurdities of that. The Americans for Prosperity Foundation, which is the main lead group here, that's the Koch brothers group, right? First of all, they're not charities. They keep calling them charities. They're fake charities. They give almost all their money to political causes which benefit Koch Industries. What an amazing coincidence. What a charity. It's a scam that it's even called a charity, right? And by the way, there's some left-wing groups on their side in this case, which I'm gonna rip into in a second, okay? But the CEO for Americans for Prosperity writes in, today's decision protects Americans from being forced to choose between staying safe or speaking up. No, wait a minute. They're very literally not speaking up. They're not saying a word. In fact, they're in an undisclosed bunker. That's the whole point of this case. They say, I don't want to say anything. I want to be secret. I just want to funnel money to politicians. That's what we used to call a bribe. And the Supreme Court says, yes, of course, not speaking is speaking. Not speaking is speaking. They have a right to speak up. Okay, great, then step up and speak up. No. They don't want to speak up. They just want to give hundreds of millions of dollars behind the scenes so they can get billions of dollars in tax cuts and deregulation.
What did we tell you guys? I mean, we covered other Supreme Court rulings recently on the show. These corporate conservative justices were not installed in the Supreme Court because conservative groups like Americans for Prosperity actually care about social issues. They don't care about social issues at all. they would have Republican voters believe that they care about social issues. In reality, all they want to do is install justices that will protect corporate interests. And in this regard, they're doing just that by making it easier to funnel money to politicians or funnel money to groups, and to do it in a way that wouldn't even lead to any type of negative attention, because they can do it anonymously, essentially. They don't have to report it. The donors' names, the donors' organization does not have to be disclosed. That's what this ruling indicates.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna go back to that same CEO, Emily Seidel, for Americans for Prosperity Foundation. She said, the work of addressing injustice and advocating for change is hard enough without people facing fear of harassment. Wait, are they speaking or are they not speaking? The underlying thesis for all of this, going all the way back to 1976, Buckley v. Vallejo, Bellotti, Citizens United, McCutcheon, in this case is, hey, money's just speech. These poor guys, they just want to talk. Well, then why don't they come out and talk? No, there would be harassment. We don't want to talk. We just want to buy the politicians in secret. And this deeply corrupt Supreme Court said, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, why don't you go do that? We'll make Citizens United way worse. Okay, by the way, guys, I explain all of this in my book that's gonna come out soon, justicescomingbook.com. So the reason I tell you that is because it's a longer explanation. But basically in 1971, the Chamber of Commerce wrote a memo saying, why don't we buy off the Supreme Court? And if we capture the Supreme Court, they'll just change all the laws for us and we won't have to bother with democracy. And this is exactly what resulted from this. The corporate machines set to take over our government, they had a plan, they executed the plan, and it totally worked. These 6 conservatives are not at all conservative. Anna's absolutely right. They're just corporate robots.
100%. 100%.
And now let me get to the so-called progressive groups. Look, I say so-called, I get it, they're great in other contexts, including the NAACP. Love them, we have them on the show all the time. But they're with these groups, why? They don't want their donors disclosed either. Now they might have some legitimate reasons for that, but they also get money from corporations, they do, right? And so, I don't want people to know about that. Well, I don't care if you're on the left. No, you don't get to hide your donors, right? And the number one culprit, the ACLU. So ACLU is like, no, I don't care. Money's awesome and it's speech, and don't look at my donors, and I'm doing this out of principle, and I don't see the bribery. I don't see that as a governmental interest. I think money is just talking to people. Like, and Jamie Raskin, who's in Congress now, had a great line once about this. So if you go and give money to a prostitute, are you just talking to her? Because you'd be arrested, right?
It's a really good point. It's a really, really good point.
Officer, what do you mean? I was talking to her. And in fact, you don't have a right to even see what we're doing. We're gonna go commit illegal activities, you're not allowed to look, and you're not allowed to even find out what the hell I'm saying, because it's just money.
It's amazing. Well, the NAACP and the ACLU is in agreement with the US Chamber of Commerce, which of course does not hide the fact that they want this ruling to apply more broadly to the electoral process, elections. Freedoms of speech and association deserve the same rigorous protection in the context of elections as they do in other contexts, the influential US Chamber of Commerce argued in its brief to the court. Because really, this country is dominated by the US Chamber of Commerce. It's not dominated by democracy, the democratic process, any specific political party. It's whatever corporate interests want, corporate interests will get. And while there's all sorts of nonsense infighting with people who claim they want to change the system, the fact of the matter is you have the corporate wing of this country that's incredibly powerful. Obviously, they've got the resources, but they're organized. They understand the importance of the elections that take place, of ensuring that they strategically think about how to install these pro-corporate justices into the Supreme Court. That's why whenever someone tells you, elections don't matter, don't pay attention at all, who cares about the Supreme Court? You should care about the Supreme Court, because the rulings that they're passing down right now are going to impact us for generations. Okay, how do you reverse something like this? It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible. And so why would anyone advocate for something that actually makes it far more difficult to strategically accomplish what the left wants to accomplish? Why? Why would they do that? It makes no sense.
Look, that's why I'm so proud that wolf-pac is nonpartisan, and they're not playing around. They're super nonpartisan. They've got some of the most conservative legislators that I totally disagree with on every other issue at the state level that introduce our resolution, because some right-wing voters, a lot of right-wing voters, also hate the corruption, right? And it allows them to do what almost no other group does. So the groups are usually either on the left or the right. So when it comes to the groups on the left that are terrible on this issue, like Common Cause, now Common Cause is not involved in this as far as I know, but they all pretend to be against money in politics and then secretly help money in politics. ACLU is abhorrent on this issue. Well, wolf-pac calls them out. Every other group's like, oh, no, they're allies, don't touch them because we're on the left. Well, I don't care about the left or the right. Wolf-pac doesn't care about that. We care about, are you in favor of corruption or are you against it? The ACLU did brilliant work in the Trump years, and they upheld our rights. And yes, you can do nuance and say they're great on this and terrible on this, right? They did great work and they collected tons and tons of money. Then they took some of that money and they used it to argue to keep money in politics. So ACLU is completely 100% in favor of Citizens United. You should, if you donate to ACLU, you should let them know, don't take my money and then go spend it on a case that aids and abets corruption in this country. You don't have to hate them, they're just wrong. It's okay to say, look, I love you, but you're wrong, and I don't want my money spent on that, okay? And then lastly, on the Republicans, Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump agreed on one thing. They agreed that the IRS should also not be allowed to see the secret donors.
It's insane.
So Trump wanted to drain the swamp. If you're on the right, look at what I just told you about the left, right? So we're honest about that. Do you ever see anybody on the right honest about the right, including Donald Trump? No, they were busy kissing his ass 24/7. Did he drain the swamp? Hell no. He instituted a law or a rule I should say, where he said, oh no, I don't want you to see the secret donors that are funneling me money. Oh, by the way, the corrupt Republicans' money, corrupt Democrats' money. I don't want you to see Pelosi's donors. I don't want you to see McConnell's donors. So I want the IRS to not be able to see who these secret donors are either. You know why? Because Trump loves the swamp. Mitch McConnell is the top swamp monster in the world. They're fighting now, but when it comes to corruption, that's the one thing they agree on. Yes. They love the corruption, they love the swamp. We all got to get united on the right and the left as actual voters and say we've had enough of Washington and all of this corruption. wolf-pac.com, go join them now, join the effort, whether you're right or left wing. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.